This is Jed Disler, and welcome to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. A subscriber asked me if I would consider devoting a podcast episode to the Welsh pianist Martin Jones, and in particular his complete cycle of Debussy's solo piano music for the Nimbus label. So I thought that would be a good idea. What can one say about Martin Jones, who turned 85 in February 2025? He has been one of the Nimbus label's mainstays ever since the label began, I think, and his recorded output is awesomely immense, to say the least. He's done complete cycles of solo piano works by Mendelssohn, by Brahms, by Szymanowski, Korngold, Montpu, Percy Grainger. He's done reams of Spanish music, tons of British and Welsh contemporary music. Somehow he hasn't yet done the complete Beethoven and Mozart cycles, or at least I don't know about it if he's done that. But my God, there is so much music, and he has such a catholic and wide-ranging repertoire. It's an immense discography, and it's really pretty consistent artistically. Now, the only issue, though, that some collectors will have about these recordings has to do with the heavily reverberant sonics, which the label calls ambisonics, which is basically surround sound. It's a rather soft, focused sonic conception, very spacious sounding, totally the opposite of close miking. For me, it often depends on the repertoire. In Debussy's case, the extreme recording philosophy and pronounced reverberation in these recordings, I think, works to a certain degree because, as you know, Debussy conceived of his keyboard music as being played on a piano without hammers or words to that effect. So that said, there's a lot to savor in Martin Jones' Debussy cycle. And by the way, these Martin Jones cycles were offered by Nimbus in super inexpensive box sets years ago. I remember you could find this 5-disc Debussy cycle for something like $18 at the old Tower Records. And a lot of Nimbus boxes, a lot of these super budget Nimbus boxes got shoved onto the market in 1997. And I vaguely remember writing an extremely general, encapsulated type of review in an overview of the series. I think I did this for Gramophone. And in this series, you had things like the Vlado Perlmutter Chopin box, the complete Beethoven sonatas with Bernard Roberts. I know I did definitely cover the Martin Jones, Brahms, and Grainger, and Mendelssohn and Debussy cycles. So because of this subscriber's suggestion, I started to revisit the Debussy cycle, and I'll comment on certain portions of it. I won't talk about the whole thing, but there were certain things that I re-listened to that really struck me, like the Image Book 1 and 2. These are stately and serious performances, but very beautiful in terms of care over voicing and timing. And by contrast, the outer movements of the Étampes suite are relatively animated, but also texturally quite clear and three-dimensional. And Martin Jones is one of the few pianists who doesn't round off pagode the way so many pianists do. So you really get this sense of metric modulation that you hear in gamelan ensembles. His Debussy etudes are very well done, especially the first one for the 5 fingers. The etude in fourths is wonderful. The etude in sixths, maybe that's a little literal, and it's not so sexy as I normally like it to sound. But what a fabulous mad dash through the etude for the 8 fingers. That's a marvelous performance, and a very colorful one at that. And what gorgeous atmosphere Martin Jones creates in the Etude number 10 for opposing sonorities. I've always thought that this introspective etude is Debussy's most profound piano piece. And I don't say that lightly, but I've studied this piece and I've performed it and I've really thought about this carefully, and I truly think it's quite profound. So let's talk about the Preludes, books 1 and 2. The atmospheric preludes go very well, as you would expect, and, that sonorous haze kind of fits the music. Although I think after a while, with the sonic ambience, I get a little bit fatigued. I can only listen to so much at one time. But in the Preludes, I was especially surprised and pleased by Martin Jones in his rather brisk treatment of Prelude number 4 in Book 1, Les sons et les parfums tournant dans l'air du soir. Did I pronounce that halfway decently? Probably not. But what is interesting about his performance is that his basic pulse brings out the music's feeling of being a saraband. He doesn't, moon over it. It's really very straightforward and rhythmic. But by contrast, he holds back the interrupted serenade a little bit. That's Prelude number 9, Book 1. But this measured tempo gives the repeated notes much more time to breathe and take on a really convincing lilt. And as a consequence, those big dynamic outbursts have a real weighty impact. If you play this piece too fast, you wind up having to shoehorn all of the details within each measure as if you're chasing the metronome. Similarly, the slight hesitancies in General Levine, eccentric, in Book 2, bring out the quirky asymmetry of Debussy's cakewalking in this piece. And speaking of cakewalks, in the children's corner, Martin Jones plays the Gollywog's Cakewalk with some real fancy footwork. And all the various short pieces benefit from this pianist's care and thoughtful detailing. I also should mention that he gives excellently played solo piano versions of 3 orchestral ballets, Jeu, Kama, and La Boîte à Joujou. So if you can deal with that kind of wrong end of the telescope sonic philosophy that's typical of Nimbus piano recordings, I would seriously check out Martin Jones' Debussy cycle. But if you want more conventional modern-day sonics, then I would recommend the Debussy cycles from Jean F. Lambavouze on chandos, or Alain Planet on Harmonia Mundi, if you can still find that. And then there's one special favorite of mine. It's the Debussy cycle by Martino Tirimo. It was originally issued by Collins Classics and more recently reissued by Musical Concepts. This is a real sleeper of a Debussy cycle, and I should talk about it in a future podcast episode. So do investigate Martin Jones and his Debussy cycle with all of my sonic caveats, of course. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings, and I look forward to being with you for our next episode. Take good care.